Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a Semana TV. Es un verdadero placer saludarlos nuevamente hoy con un invitado muy especial de un tema muy importante que ha tenido lugar en la última semana, en las últimas semanas aquí en Colombia, pero también con repercusión en Estados Unidos y viceversa. Se trata de la bananera Chiquita Brands International, que fue declarada responsable de financiar al grupo paramilitar Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia por un jurado en los Estados Unidos. Esto que ha causado mucha repercusión, no solo en los Estados Unidos, por supuesto, sino aquí en Colombia, donde se encuentra la empresa ubicada. Con nosotros está nuestro editor de Internacional también, Juan Felipe Useche. Juan Felipe, buenas tardes y cuéntenos un poco de qué se trata este caso y por qué nos afecta tanto a los colombianos.
Juan David, buenas tardes y buenas tardes también para toda la audiencia de Semana. Y sí, en este caso hemos visto los alcances de la justicia norteamericana con esta bananera Chiquita Brands, una bananera estadounidense que durante años y años ha operado en Colombia y que hace semanas fue condenada por la justicia estadounidense por vínculos con grupos paramilitares, específicamente con la AUC. Este fallo, que llegó hace unas solas semanas, terminó con dictando culpabilidad para estas personas de la bananera y haciéndolas responsables por la muerte de 8 personas, digamos que fueron víctimas de los grupos paramilitares, que fueron asesinadas, otras que fueron desaparecidas, pero también pues explica mucho de que aún hay muchos más casos, de que son miles las víctimas y que este fallo, digamos que es como una pequeña introducción para lo que sería una gran culpabilidad para Chiquita Brands, que pues por ejemplo nunca llegó a un acuerdo con las víctimas, sino que pues lo que siempre quiso hacer fue más bien ir a juicio, que es algo como un poco curioso porque realmente en este tipo de casos no es muy común, pero Chiquita Brands quiso irse a juicio y el juicio llegó y pues les dio estas, o sea, hasta ahora son demandas civiles y que han terminado con millonarias multas para Chiquita Brands.
Lo último que sabemos es que la bananera Chiquita Brands va a apelar esta decisión. Pero para ahondar un poco más en el tema, tenemos comunicación en este momento directamente desde los Estados Unidos con Jonathan Reiter. Él es abogado y es uno de los principales abogados de las víctimas de Chiquita Brands en Estados Unidos y los va a representar ante la corte, ante los Estados Unidos directamente. Para nosotros es un placer saludarlo. Mr. Attorney Reiter, it's an honor talking to you today. Welcome to Semana TV.
Thank you so much for having me on your program.
La primera pregunta que nos gustaría saber es ¿cómo toman este fallo de la justicia norteamericana contra Chiquita Brands?
Well, the most important thing is that the American system of justice gave the victims of the AUC violence and Chiquita's contribution to the AUC violence. In the American system of justice, a jury was selected to hear all of the evidence that was presented. And after being instructed on the law by the judge, the jury rendered its verdict and rendered a verdict of liability against Chiquita Brands International on behalf of in effect, 8 families who were victimized as part of this case. This trial that took place was what's called a bellwether trial. And a bellwether trial means that it's a representative for all of the other cases. It doesn't mean that the other cases have been decided in that trial. It just means that the court is given an idea of how the jury found the evidence in the case, because the evidence for all of the other cases is going to be similar. And as we know, there are approximately 5,000 cases that are pending. And this was the first group of cases for the victims. The case has been going on for 17 years approximately, and it was a wonderful a wonderful verdict, a wonderful outcome for these families and for all of the families who have people who were killed by the AUC and Chiquita Brands was found responsible for those deaths in this case.
La segunda pregunta que yo tengo es ¿cómo considera que actuó Chiquita en este caso?
Well, every trial is a battle between one side and the other. And in this trial, Chiquita tried to prove certain things. They tried to prove that they were not responsible because they were simply being extorted by the AUC. And on the other hand, the lawyers for the victims showed that that Chiquita was not just being extorted, that Chiquita was actively participating with the AUC for its own purposes. And that was a very important piece of evidence. The jury specifically found that Chiquita's defense, they put up this defense, in effect, of extortion, or the legal term for it would be called duress. So Chiquita specifically made this argument that they made these payments under duress, meaning that they were coerced into making the payments. And the jury found against them on that point, specifically finding that their claim of duress was not valid. Because if their claim of duress had been found to be valid, then the victims would have lost the case. But the jury found that based on the evidence, their claim of duress was not valid. And as a result, the jury awarded compensation to the victims' family members.
A mí me gustaría saber cuál es el precedente que hay sobre este caso en los Estados Unidos y si sobre todo este nuevo caso de Chiquita Brands sienta mejor un precedente en los Estados Unidos hoy en la justicia norteamericana.
This is a very important case, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people, because it is the first case that we know of in which a jury found an American corporation or an American company responsible for what amounts to human rights violations in a foreign country, in this case, Colombia. And this is a very important concept because the view of the law is that, and the view of people of goodwill all around the world, is that companies, corporations are citizens of the world. They must act as citizens of the world. They cannot simply act to maximize their own profits. They also must take account of the effect that their activities have on people in other countries. And that is the most important underlying point of the case, that a corporation, which is an American company, just because it is doing business in a foreign country, cannot just say, well, we're not responsible for what we do in a foreign country. And the American courts have recognized to some degree that American corporations can be held responsible for activities in foreign countries. But this is the first time that we know of that a case of this kind, where Chiquita Brands International was found responsible for these terrible consequences of its actions in Colombia, and the jury found against them. So that sets a precedent.
Abogado, yo también quisiera preguntarle un poco acerca de cuál es su opinión acerca de que llegue el aparato judicial estadounidense y llegue primero a estas conclusiones judiciales, a estas condenas, antes que el sistema colombiano.
I wish I could give you a good answer for that. Common sense would tell you that there should have been a resolution of this case in Colombia long time ago. But there's a couple of legal issues. The first is that In Colombia, a corporation cannot be held criminally responsible. Only individuals can be held criminally responsible. In Colombia at the present time, there is an indictment, a list of accusations pending against specific individuals who were associated with or worked for Chiquita, arising out of these events in which they paid money to the AUC over a lengthy period of time. That case, that criminal case in Colombia, has not gotten the resources and the attention and the political push to resolve that case up to the present time. I'm very hopeful, and I think what will happen is now that this verdict has been rendered in the civil case in the United States, that there will be more attention and more resources given to the prosecutor's office in Colombia to proceed with the criminal case in Colombia. Because the people who are affected, the families who have loved ones who were killed or maimed or disappeared, abducted, kidnapped, those families deserve a kind of emotional closure and a kind of emotional satisfaction, at least to know that justice has been done. And one thing that I've learned as an attorney over the years, it's one thing, and it's a very important thing, that there be monetary compensation to the families. That's very important. But even more important, in some ways, is that the families feel that they have been given justice on some level. Because human beings need to feel that the world around them, that the country they live in, has justice. When they don't feel that way, it causes them emotional pain, that their loved ones were killed and there's been no justice rendered for them. So that's very, very important. And we feel hopeful that because now that there's been a verdict in the United States, that the Colombian criminal proceeding, will have some new life and will have some new energy and new resources devoted to it. Because I think the people of Colombia need that and want that, and it should be done. Whatever comes of it, whatever comes of it. But it should be something that is given priority now, in my humble opinion.
Sí, y hablando de esa indemnización que podrían estar recibiendo las familias, me gustaría saber si la defensa de las familias afectadas por Chiquita Brands e incluso las mismas familias están de acuerdo con las millonarias indemnizaciones que ordenó la justicia norteamericana para las víctimas de esta empresa en Colombia.
I don't know what you mean agree about it. The jury rendered verdicts for these 8 people who were the claimants in this particular case. And those verdicts were in the millions of American dollars for each victim. And we feel, I feel personally, and the group of attorneys that I have been working with on this case, feel that those were very fair, very just, and very, very significant amounts in this case. And if you had been in court and heard the terrible stories of what these victims endured, you would think that if the jury had awarded 2 times or 3 times or 5 times more than those millions that they awarded, it would still be justified, because there are circumstances in this case where some of these people were killed in front of their wives and children, mothers, fathers. They're terrible stories, and each one of these victims suffered tremendous emotional trauma as a result of these events. It's very difficult to put a number, compensation for those kind of terrible, terrible events. But under American law, these amounts are very fair, very reasonable, and I think totally justified by the evidence that the jury heard. And I think they could have awarded a great deal more, but they were conservative, actually, in what they awarded in this case, in my opinion.
Abogado, nosotros también quisiéramos entender un poco cómo fue esa defensa de Chiquita Brands. Sabemos que ellos, pues, de alguna manera intentaron defenderse bajo los argumentos de que están siendo extorsionados, pero quisiéramos saber, que nos explicara un poco más acerca de cómo fue esa defensa de Chiquita Brands.
Well, as I said before, I would say the major thing that they were trying to convince the jury of was that they were simply making these payments to the AUC to protect their own employees from violence by the AUC. That was the main point that they were trying to convince the jury of. And what actually the evidence did show was that not only were they making payments, they were also actively cooperating with members of the AUC. And that even if they were trying to protect their own employees, they actually had a duty to do it in a way that did not increase the risk that people who were not their employees, people who were simply living in the area of Urabá, of Santa Marta, Magdalena, that their payments to the AUC were making the lives of these innocent people who were not associated with Chiquita at risk of being killed, at risk of being abducted, at risk of being kidnapped, disappeared, murdered. So it goes beyond their very narrow view of what their responsibilities were. And this is a very important point to understand. The jury, in effect, found that they had, by their actions, made it more likely that our clients would be killed or abducted, murdered, so forth, even if they were trying to protect their own employees. That doesn't excuse the fact that they were putting our clients in harm's way. The second point is that Chiquita was trying to make themselves out to be an innocent victim, when the evidence showed that they came into Colombia knowing that it was a very dangerous situation, that there were armed groups both on the left and on the right, and that they put themselves in a position where they might have to make payments. And that was a very important point, that they themselves put themselves in harm's way. And then, even after they knew that their payments were harming the people of Colombia, they didn't leave. They didn't make an effort to leave. They just decided it was worth it to make their millions in profits, to put the innocent people of Colombia at risk. And that was wrong. And I think the jury found that it was wrong. That's the most important point.
Bueno, y esta es la última pregunta para el abogado, que hemos abusado de su tiempo el día de hoy, pero sí nos gustaría saber cuál es su opinión de que Chiquita Brands vaya a apelar la decisión y qué significa esto para la defensa de las víctimas.
Well, we always knew that if there was a verdict against Chiquita, that they would take an appeal to the higher court. And that's expected. And nevertheless, we, the attorneys for the victims, feel that the verdict was fair and reasonable, and that the judge presided over the case properly, and that his rulings were proper and correct, and that he gave a fair trial to both sides. And that's the most important thing. Chiquita will be arguing that they didn't get a fair trial, that the judge made rulings which were a mistake. And we feel that the judge was extremely careful and extremely diligent in making his rulings, and that the appellate court, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, will uphold these verdicts. It will take time, because it always does, but we feel very confident that the appellate court will rule in our favor, and that these verdicts will be what's called affirmed, that they will be given effect and will stand up, and the appellate court will feel that the judge did a good job and his rulings were proper and correct. Before I go, I just want to say to all of my clients, the clients of the Jonathan C. Reiter law firm, please feel free to reach out to us. Let us know how you're feeling, and we'll provide any information to you. You can call us at these numbers, +57 347 990 6879 or +57 300 826 9969. And we'll be happy to talk to you and explain all the details of what we expect to happen in the case. And we want to hear from you. So I want to thank you very much for having me. And I hope I've answered your questions in a way that will help the people of Colombia understand the importance of this very, very serious case.
No, attorney, thank you very much. You were very, very clear about the information we needed. Have you been in Colombia before?
I have, yes, several
Right.
times.
That's amazing. Always welcome to our country, attorney, and thank you very much for this time here with us. It was an honor talking to you and understand a little bit more about this very important case that it takes with the victims of Chiquita Brands. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, very welcome.
Él es Jonathan C. Reiter, el abogado principal de las víctimas, de algunas de las víctimas de Chiquita Brands, después de un caso que ha resonado bastante, no solo en los Estados Unidos, sino en Colombia. Cualquier información que usted requiera de más, puede ingresar de inmediato a www.semana.com. Muchas gracias, feliz tarde.